All right, welcome to another episode of the Accidental Landlord Podcast. I'm your host, Peter McKenzie. Today's episode is going to be short and sweet, and we are going to do our quarter update for the first quarter of 2024. What's going on in the market, what's changed, what we're seeing, what we advise, that type of thing. So we're going to go over the same stats. We did add one stat, which is the CPI, which we'll talk about in a little bit, on what's happening in the market. So let's get right into it. So last quarter 2023, available rentals in Ventura County, 629. This quarter, first quarter of 2024, 610. So a slight dip in the number of available rental properties. This is countywide. The city of Ventura, last quarter, 133 properties available for rent. This quarter, 127. So relatively the same. Now, let's talk about average rent price. And just so we're comparing apples to apples, we're talking about a 3-bedroom house in the city of Ventura. And this is the median rent. This is not every single 3-bedroom house. So last quarter was right around $33,750. And this quarter, the average or the median price is $4,200. Now understand, in the city of Ventura, there's only so many 3-bedroom houses. So the sample pool is relatively small, which is probably why there's such a big increase from last quarter to this quarter. It's not that rents went up over $500. It's that the pool of rentals that they're gauging this data from probably had a few outliers, which is why that changed that. According to Zillow, the year-over-year change this quarter versus a year ago was down $700, which we know is absolutely not accurate across the board. Again, it's because the smaller sample size in Ventura, only 3-bedroom properties. We're trying to bring you guys the same data so it starts to make sense and you understand what we're pulling from and what conclusions you can make from that. Now, let's talk about days on market. There are some significant changes here, and I think it's worth talking about. So last quarter, days on market, 58. And this is rental days on market, not sales days on market. This quarter, 38. So last quarter, 58, this quarter, 38. That's a reduction of 20 days, which means that properties are renting out faster. And then this next stat is even more indicative of what's happening. So houses available, 62, and houses available last quarter, 62. Houses available this quarter, and remember, this is 3-bedroom houses, 32. So we cut the inventory of available 3-bedrooms in half, which is probably why we saw a pretty significant increase, even though the statistically the numbers might not be 100% accurate. But if we cut the supply in half, it's going to make the properties that are available rent faster and for more. So that is good news if you're a landlord, bad news if you're a renter. And vacancy rates stayed relatively the same. I think statewide, they were right around 5%. Didn't see a lot of change there. So what does this information mean for you? A couple things. If you're a landlord, it's encouraging. Rents are starting to go up. We are consistently seeing our properties rent fairly quickly. So if the days on market across the city, with the data that Zillow's pulling, is at 38, and this is not necessarily days on market, but it's another thing that we track, which is what we call from showings to leases signed. And that's when a property is rent ready and able to be shown to a prospective tenant, to when we have a signed lease. This isn't necessarily when someone moves in, it's when the lease is signed, security deposit's paid, and it's technically rented. Last quarter, we were about 6 to 7 days. This quarter, we're about 12 days. We reset every quarter, which is why between the two quarters, you'll see some fairly big jumps, either up or down. But this quarter, or the first quarter of 2024, we're seeing about 12.38 days, which is still really, really good. That means we're renting our properties out quickly, and that's just a testament to best practices when it comes to advertising and showing and screening applications and all those other things. The only thing related to the sales market that we do like to mention is what are the interest rates doing. Last quarter, they were high 6s, low 7s. This quarter, they're relatively the same. We're obviously not going to get super granular on how many basis points and what's coming and what's not, but just to give you an idea, in general, the interest rates are still about the same that they were last quarter. Now, we are going to add a metric to this update that we're going to report on every single quarter, and that is the consumer price index. And the reason that's important for landlords is if you own a property that's subject to Assembly Bill 1482 or the new Senate Bill 567, which we will be doing a podcast episode on. It's basically Assembly Bill 1482 like 2.0. So the legislator came out and made Assembly Bill 1482 a little stricter with this Senate Bill 567, but it goes back to how much, if your property is subject to that bill, how much can you raise the rent by? And you can raise the rent, according to the law, 5% plus the consumer price index, or 10%, and it's whichever one is lower. Now, there were times when inflation was out of control that the 10% was the lower number. That's not necessarily the case today. Last quarter, the CPI was right around 4%. And obviously this is for California only. And the CPI is based on the geographical area that you're in, usually tied to a metro area. Ours happens to be Los Angeles area. It was 4%. So if you have a property that's subject to this law, you could raise the rents 9%. We always go a little bit below in our particular company just to be safe. By a little bit below, I usually mean like 8.5, 8.75. But this particular quarter, you could raise it up to 9%. We'll report on the CPI for the next quarter because I think the information comes out quarterly. But that only applies if your property is subject to the statewide rent control, which is part of the Tenant Protection Act. As far as the other thing we like to talk about is pre-advertising, we're still doing the same thing. We're pre-advertising about a week out, and we're finding good results with that. Sometimes we pre-advertise a lot further in advance, sometimes not so much. And the reason why is sometimes if you put your property on and there's a lot of available inventory and there's not a lot of people looking, you can actually do a disservice by showing everybody if it's not available and they want a property now, it can be a bad thing. It can also work to your favor, which is why we adjust the time frame in which we do it. That's all for the market update. I would say overall things are improving. We're not seeing the longer days on market. We're not seeing as much negotiating from tenants, which is good. We are seeing that if a landlord is willing to price the property accurately, that they are getting the rents that they're asking. If they're a little unreasonable in the rent price and it's way too high, it's taking longer. And usually the market will beat you up a little bit until you're willing to lower the price to where the market thinks it should be. And then we're seeing people rent their properties out quickly. Hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions or you know a landlord that has property in our area, please share the update. We're trying to get this information out to as many landlords as we can so that we can all kind of level up and be aware of what's going on in our market. If you want to reach out to Rincon Property Management and you want to talk about any property management type services, we'd be ecstatic to have those conversations as well. Until next time, thank you.